In this podcast, our two hosts describe the publication, A Pro-Innovation Approach to AI Regulation, which outlines the UK nation's strategy for governing artificial intelligence, aiming to foster innovation while managing associated risks. The document proposes a principles-based framework that existing regulators will apply, focusing on the contextual use of AI rather than the technology itself. Key principles include safety, security, robustness, transparency, explainability, fairness, accountability, governance, contestability, and redress. The government plans to provide central support functions like monitoring, risk assessment, and sandbox initiatives to ensure coherence and adaptability as AI rapidly evolves, positioning the UK as a global leader in responsible AI development.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get you straight to the most important insights on today's critical topics.
Great to be here.
So think about it. AI is already, kind of a quiet, powerful force in your daily life. It's that silent intelligence, maybe recommending your next binge watch, or optimizing your commute, even helping your bank spot fraud.
It's pretty seamlessly integrated, yeah, often without us even consciously realizing it. But it's fundamentally transforming so many things around us.
It truly is. And that transformation, it feels like it's only speeding up.
Absolutely. And that's why today we're taking a deep dive into the UK government's pro-innovation approach to AI regulation white paper. This was published back in March 2023.
Okay.
And look, this isn't just some dry regulatory document. It's really framed as a strategic blueprint. The ambition is to position the UK as, a global leader.
The best place in the world, they say.
That's the phrase they use, yeah. The best place to build, test, and use AI technology.
That's a huge ambition. So our mission today for this deep dive is really to pull out the core insights from this paper.
Right.
Especially focusing on how the UK plans to harness all those huge opportunities from advanced AI, particularly large language models, LLMs.
Which are everywhere now.
Exactly. But at the same time, how they're trying to proactively tackle the complex risks these technologies bring.
It's a balancing act.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we'll explore the principles they're laying out, the practical mechanisms, the tools they're proposing to achieve that delicate balance.
So what's really fascinating here is just the sheer scale of the UK's ambition. They're not just talking about, small steps.
No.
The government explicitly aims for the UK to become a science and technology superpower by 2030. And AI is absolutely central to that vision.
A superpower.
Yeah.
And, they're building on a pretty strong foundation already, right?
Oh, definitely. It's quite striking when you look at the stats. The UK is apparently third in the world for AI research and development.
Third?
Yeah. And digging into the numbers a bit, they host a third of Europe's total AI companies.
A third.
Which is, get this, twice as many as any other European country.
Okay, that's a significant lead. That's a serious starting point, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's backed by, serious commitment, serious resources.
Right.
The UK has poured over $2.5 billion into AI since 2014, and more recently, there's been substantial new funding announced.
Like what?
Well, there's $110 million for the AI Tech Missions Fund, but maybe more critically, there's a massive $900 million to establish a new AI research resource and to develop an exascale supercomputer.
Exascale, that sounds
powerful. Extremely powerful. Think of an exascale machine as just a data processing behemoth. It's capable of a billion calculations per second.
Okay, wow.
And that kind of raw computing power is absolutely critical for training these, truly massive and complex LLMs that are pushing AI's boundaries today.
That really puts the scale of investment into perspective. And we're already seeing the benefits, aren't we?
Yeah.
The tangible stuff.
We are, yeah. The paper points to AI improving NHS medical care and making transport safer right now.
And then there are those big breakthrough examples, like DeepMind.
Right. DeepMind, which is a UK-based company, of course, their breakthrough predicting the structure of almost every protein known to science. That's just huge.
It really is. And the downstream effects, accelerating drug discovery, helping fight malaria, antibiotic resistance, even tackling plastic waste. That's genuinely transformative stuff.
Absolutely. And its reach goes way beyond medicine, too. Remember the first ever image of a black hole?
Vaguely, yeah. AI was involved.
A computer vision model helped piece together the first ever image. And back here on Earth, things like deep learning AI showing potential to improve breast cancer screening, speeding up diagnoses, freeing up clinicians.
Yeah.
That's massive.
It really is. And in other sectors, too.
Yeah. Farming efficiency increased by AI robots, managing fields better sustainability, better productivity.
It's incredible how varied these applications are. It's accelerating new medicine discovery by identifying potential biologically active compounds from millions of candidates.
Exactly. Finds the needle in the haystack much faster.
And on a more sobering note, but just as crucial, it's being used in fighting crime. The paper mentions the Child Images Abuse Database, helping identify victims and perpetrators.
Which is vital work. And it's also significantly boosting cybersecurity capabilities by analyzing malware, responding to network vulnerabilities at speeds no human team could possibly match.
Right. But, as we integrate something so powerful, so pervasive, it makes you think, doesn't it? With great power
comes great responsibility. And definitely new risks.
Indeed. And that's precisely why this white paper isn't just, a rah-rah celebration of AI's potential.
Not at all. It's a very sober acknowledgement of the profound challenges that come with it. They explicitly highlight new risks like physical harm, the potential for undermining national security, and even things like risks to mental health.
So the flip side is clear. And the paper really hammers this home. Public trust in AI will be undermined unless these risks are addressed.
And wider concerns, too, about bias and discrimination.
Exactly. And without that trust, the paper warns, innovation could be stifled and AI adoption slowed.
Which defeats the whole purpose of the pro-innovation stance.
Precisely. They mention serious ethical challenges, privacy infringements, and the potential for AI to cause and amplify discrimination, in areas like the justice system or even credit assessment.
Really sensitive areas.
Yeah, so it raises this huge question. How on earth do you regulate something with such broad applications? Something with the potential for both immense good and, significant harm.
That is the core challenge, isn't it? And the UK's regulatory stance, as laid out in the white paper, proposes this pro-innovation and proportionate regulatory framework.
Okay.
And the absolute key here, the distinguishing feature maybe, is that it focuses on the context in which AI is deployed.
Context, not the tech itself. Why that approach?
Well, the reasoning is pretty pragmatic. AI is what they call a general-purpose technology.
Meaning?
Meaning its risks vary massively depending on how it's used. Think about it. Using a chatbot to summarize an article.
Low risk.
Pretty low risk, yeah. Using that same underlying tech to give medical advice.
Very different risk profile. Much higher stakes.
Exactly. So a rigid technology-specific regulation would probably become outdated incredibly quickly, given how fast AI is developing, and it could potentially stifle innovation in those lower risk areas.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So context is key. How do they actually define AI then for this regulatory purpose, if they're not defining the tech itself?
Good question. They focus on two key functional characteristics, adaptivity and autonomy.
Adaptivity and autonomy. Why those two? What makes them so central to the regulatory challenge?
Well, adaptivity essentially refers to how AI systems are trained, they learn, and they can start to perform new forms of inference not directly envisioned by their human programmers.
So they go beyond their initial programming.
In a way, yes. It makes the system's intent or its specific logic quite difficult to fully explain after it's been deployed. It can learn things, patterns, correlations that no human explicitly coded in.
Right. And autonomy.
Autonomy describes how some AI systems can make decisions without the express intent or ongoing control of a human.
Okay, and that sounds like it creates real challenges for responsibility.
Exactly. It directly challenges traditional legal frameworks. Who is responsible when an autonomous system makes a decision that causes harm?
So you put adaptivity and autonomy together.
And the white paper says it can be difficult to explain, predict, or control the outputs of an AI system, or the underlying logic by which they are generated.
Which makes assigning responsibility really tough.
Precisely. And that's why they argue a bespoke regulatory response is needed, something that goes beyond traditional rules designed for predictable, human-controlled tools. Because the AI can learn and act in ways its creators might not have fully foreseen or intended.
Got it. So how do they guide this flexible, context-based approach?
So the white paper lays out 5 cross-sectoral principles. These are designed to ensure some consistency across the board, but still give flexibility to existing regulators who know their sectors best.
Okay, 5 principles. What are they?
At their core, the first one is that AI systems must be safe, secure, and robust.
Meaning?
meaning they function reliably, they're protected from, malicious attacks or misuse, and they perform consistently throughout their life cycle. It also means continuously assessing and managing risks.
Okay, makes sense. Safe, secure, robust. What's next?
Second is appropriate transparency and explainability. This is a big one.
Transparency and explainability, are they different?
Yeah, they make a distinction. Transparency is more about clarifying how, when, and for which purposes AI is actually being used, just knowing it's there.
Okay.
Explainability is more about understanding the decision-making processes behind an AI's output. Why did it make that recommendation or that decision?
Ah, okay. And the level of detail needed?
Needs to be proportionate to the risk, they say. Enough so that people can understand how AI impacts them and maybe enforce their rights. They mention things like product labeling as a possible tool here.
Right. So safety, transparency, and explainability. What's principle 3?
Principle 3 is fairness. This means AI systems should not undermine the legal rights of individuals or organizations, discriminate unfairly against individuals, or create unfair market outcomes.
So this ties into existing laws.
Directly. Things like the Equality Act, data protection like UK GDPR, consumer law, competition law. It's about actively working to avoid discriminatory outcomes, which we know can be a major issue with AI trained on biased data.
Okay, reliability, transparency, fairness.
Yeah.
Covered. But who's ultimately responsible?
That brings us to Principle 4, accountability and governance.
Okay.
This focuses on ensuring there's effective oversight with clear lines of accountability across the entire AI lifecycle, even when systems are operating with high degrees of autonomy.
So even if the AI is making decisions, someone or some organization needs to be accountable.
Exactly. Robust governance procedures need to be in place.
And the final principle?
Number 5 is contestability and redress. This means that, where appropriate, users and third parties who are impacted should be able to contest an AI decision or outcome that is harmful or creates material risk of harm.
So a way to challenge the machine.
Essentially, yes. Clear, accessible routes for complaints or disputes are key.
5 principles. And how are they being implemented? Are these legally binding rules straight away?
Interestingly, no. Initially, these principles will be non-statutory.
Non-statutory, so
Well,
guidelines.
more or less. They'll be implemented by existing regulators, the MHRA for medical devices, the FCA for financial services, Ofcom for communications, and so on. The idea is these bodies already have deep understanding of their respective sectors.
And they'll apply these AI principles within their existing work.
That's the plan. The government says it will consider bringing in a statutory duty in the future if monitoring shows it's actually needed, but they're starting with this more iterative, flexible approach.
Which allows for adaptation as the tech evolves, I suppose.
Exactly. It's designed not to stifle things right out of the gate.
Okay, let's zoom in a bit on something the white paper calls transformative developments. Large language models, LLMs. We hear about them constantly. ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, the power to generate text, code, conversations.
Yeah, they're hard to avoid.
How does this UK framework specifically address the unique opportunities, but also the very unique challenges that LLMs present?
LLMs are really a prime example of that adaptivity and autonomy we talked about in action. And their impact is incredibly wide-ranging because they are so general purpose.
Right.
The opportunities are significant, and the paper highlights them. Things like automate the process of writing code and fixing programming bugs, support genetic medicine, helping people review and summarize key points from lengthy documents.
That last one is useful.
Definitely. They also mention generating stories through films and virtual reality, and how they're fundamentally changing search engines, medical devices, and financial and legal services. It's a really broad and rapidly expanding impact.
But with that broad impact must come unique challenges, especially when these models are so general purpose.
Absolutely. The white paper flags up specific risks related to LLMs. One big one is hallucinations and misinformation.
Hallucinations.
Yeah, it's the term used when LLMs essentially make things up. They're not trained on a sense of truth, as the paper puts it. They can reproduce inconsistent or false outputs that seem highly credible.
That's a serious concern, especially if people start relying on them for factual information without checking.
It absolutely is. Another major risk they flag is harmful instructions.
Like what?
Like an AI assistant based on LMM technology recommending a dangerous activity because it lacks real-world context or understanding. That could lead to actual physical harm.
Okay, that's worrying.
And then there's the issue of bias propagation. We touched on bias earlier, but with LLMs and also text-to-image generators, they can reproduce biases or stereotyping present in their training data.
Leading to offensive language or skewed content?
Yes, potentially reinforcing harmful stereotypes or leading to discriminatory outcomes in practice.
That's something we've certainly seen a lot of discussion around. And with these incredibly complex systems built by multiple teams using vast data sets, liability must get really tricky.
Extremely tricky. Liability and accountability are flagged as huge challenges, partly because of these complex AI supply chains and the general purpose nature of the foundation models themselves.
Like who's responsible if something goes wrong?
Exactly. The paper gives the example of unclear liability for an AI triage system that provides incorrect medical advice. Is it the original model developer? The company that fine-tuned it? The hospital that deployed it?
Right, it gets complicated fast.
And one more major risk, cybersecurity threats. LLMs can apparently enable hackers with little technical knowledge or skill to generate phishing campaigns with malware delivery capabilities.
Lowering the barrier to entry for cybercrime.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Making it easier to create convincing scams or malicious code.
Okay, so those are some pretty significant challenges specific to LLMs. How does the UK framework, this context-specific approach with its 5 principles, actually grapple with these LLM issues?
Well, the idea is that the principles themselves are designed to be adaptable. So take transparency and explainability for LLMs. Regulators might issue specific guidance for developers and deployers.
Like what kind of guidance?
Could be things like making it clearer when you're interacting with an AI versus a human, or maybe detailing the kind of data the LLM was trained on. Again, product labeling might come into play. The goal is to make the opaque a bit more understandable, always proportionate to the risk involved.
Okay, and accountability for LLMs,
Yeah.
given those complex supply chains.
For accountability and governance, the framework aims to encourage regulators and businesses to find ways to demonstrate accountability and good governance in responsible LLM development and use. That's crucial, given the wide-reaching impact of LLMs through the AI supply chain.
So it's about making sure regulators have the tools and understanding.
Exactly. Equipping regulators to engage effectively with all the different actors across that supply chain and figuring out how to allocate legal liability appropriately, which is, as we said, a major challenge.
And safety.
Security. For safety and robustness, regulators would likely look to existing best practices, like the principles from the National Cybersecurity Center for securing machine learning models. But they'd need adapting for the unique vulnerabilities of LLMs.
Right. And fairness, given the bias issue.
Similarly, the fairness principle provides the basis for guidance to guard against discriminatory outcomes when LLMs are used in sensitive areas, things like creditworthiness assessments or recruitment filtering. It really all circles back to applying those core principles to these new, powerful, and sometimes problematic technologies.
So the principles are the bedrock, applied contextually.
Precisely. And those new central functions within the government play a critical role here too, specifically regarding foundation models like LLMs.
How so?
Well, the central risk function is tasked with proactive, rigorous monitoring of risks associated with foundation models. The horizon scanning function will be looking out for related opportunities and emerging threats.
Okay.
And the monitoring and evaluation function will specifically assess how well the framework is actually working for LLMs. They even mention potentially monitoring the amount of compute used to train them as one possible governance tool.
Interesting, like tracking the scale of these models.
Perhaps, yeah. And finally, the UK has also set up a dedicated foundation model task force.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
Which signals a concrete commitment to building UK capabilities in this area, but also ensuring this powerful technology is harnessed responsibly.
So it's a multi-pronged approach. Principles, regulators, central monitoring, and dedicated initiatives. Seems comprehensive, aiming to be proactive.
That's the intention, yes.
Now, beyond the direct regulation piece, the white paper also talks quite a bit about empowering trustworthy AI through various tools and support mechanisms. What's in this toolkit for innovators and businesses?
Yeah, this is important. Regulation isn't happening in isolation. It's meant to be complemented by practical tools for trustworthy AI. This includes things like assurance techniques and technical standards.
Seen as aids to compliance.
Exactly, practical tools. So AI assurance techniques are basically methods to measure, evaluate, and communicate the trustworthiness of AI systems.
Like what kind of methods?
Could be things like impact assessment, audit, performance testing, even more technical stuff like formal verification methods, the government is actually launching a portfolio of AI assurance techniques to provide clearer guidance.
So it's not just about setting rules, but about giving businesses practical ways to demonstrate their AI systems meet those principles, that they're trustworthy.
Precisely. And alongside assurance techniques, there are AI technical standards.
Standards. Okay, how do they fit in?
They provide common benchmarks and practical guidance. Essentially, they help organizations show they're aligned with the AI regulatory principles in a standardized way.
Makes sense.
And the white paper outlines a kind of layered approach for applying these standards.
Layered.
Yeah. Layer 1 is about sector-agnostic standards, things relevant to almost any AI system, like standards for management systems, risk management, and quality.
Okay, foundational stuff.
Layer 2 encourages standards tackling specific issues like bias and transparency.
Got it. More focused.
And Layer 3 involves adopting tailored sector-specific standards. For example, standards developing specifically for AI in medical devices, referencing the work the MHRA is already doing.
So it builds up from general good practice to very specific applications. This all sounds like it's genuinely designed to foster innovation, not just, put the brakes on.
That's certainly the stated aim pro-innovation.
And it brings us neatly to regulatory sandboxes and test beds. What role do these play in the strategy?
They're presented as really key mechanisms for supporting innovators, providing a sort of safe space to experiment with new AI applications.
A safe space. How?
Well, their purpose is multifold: to allow innovators to get novel products and services to market faster by testing them in a controlled environment with regulatory oversight. Also to test how the regulatory framework itself is operating in practice, and to help regulators identify emerging technology and market trends.
Learning by doing for both sides.
Kinda, yeah. The UK seems to prefer a customized advice and support model for an initial pilot sandbox. They're thinking of focusing first on a single sector, multiple regulator approach,
Okay.
with the potential to expand later to multiple sectors, multiple regulators, and they point to existing sandboxes run by regulators like the ICO, Information Commissioner's Office, and the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority.
Have they been successful?
Apparently so. The paper mentions participants in those schemes accelerated their speed to market by an estimated 40% on average.
Wow, 40% faster. That's a really tangible benefit for businesses, especially startups maybe.
Definitely. It shows these sandboxes can genuinely help innovation, not hinder it.
Okay. And finally, the white paper really emphasizes the government's own role in delivering these new central functions. What's the purpose of those? Is it just more bureaucracy?
Well, the argument is they're needed to ensure coherence and coordination across the whole framework, especially since it relies on multiple existing regulators.
Right. Someone needs to keep it all joined up.
Exactly. These central functions are seen as vital for managing such a dynamic landscape. They include monitoring and evaluation, basically checking if the whole framework is actually working effectively, balancing risk mitigation and innovation support.
Makes sense.
Cross-sectoral risk assessment. This involves identifying and prioritizing AI risks that cut across the entire economy, including those really big, scary ones like high impact but low probability risks, such as existential risks posed by artificial general intelligence or AI biosecurity risks. So looking at the really major potential downsides.
Okay, the big picture risks.
Then there's education and awareness, providing guidance to businesses, but also empowering citizens to understand and engage with how the framework develops over time.
Important for public trust again.
Definitely. Also, horizon scanning to monitor emerging AI trends and opportunities, making sure the framework stays adaptable and doesn't fall behind the curve.
Keeping it future-proofed, hopefully.
That's the goal. And finally, international interoperability. Ensuring the UK's approach aligns reasonably well with global approaches. That's crucial for international trade, collaboration, and influencing how AI governance develops worldwide.
Right. Can't regulate in a vacuum.
Absolutely not. So this whole structure, these central functions, they aim to ensure the framework remains adaptable, coherent, and effective as AI continues its, incredibly rapid evolution.
Okay, so to kind of sum it all up then.
Yeah.
The UK is clearly committed to this proportionate, adaptable, and context-sensitive way of approaching AI regulation.
Yes, that captures it well.
The big goal seems to be striking that really delicate balance, fostering all that groundbreaking innovation we talked about while building and maintaining robust public trust.
Which is essential for adoption.
Absolutely. And the framework is deliberately designed, it seems, to evolve with the technology itself, recognizing that being too rigid just won't work in such a fast-moving field.
That's right. That constant learning, that adaptation, it seems baked into the very core of the strategy. The aim is definitely to create an environment where AI can flourish, but do so responsibly and safely.
And that really leaves us with a provocative thought, doesn't it, for you, the listener,
Yeah.
to mull over.
Mm-hmm.
As these AI technologies, especially those advanced LLMs, continue their relentless, rapid evolution, how might our very understanding of accountability and trust need to adapt?
Mm-hmm.
Not just in these regulatory frameworks we've discussed, but actually in our daily interactions with these increasingly sophisticated, sometimes unpredictable systems.
It's a deep question, and maybe worth considering how these principles we've discussed, safety, transparency, fairness, accountability, contestability, might apply or need to evolve in your own life or your work.
Food for thought indeed.
Mm.
It encourages that continuous learning and critical thinking about AI's ever-expanding role in our society.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope it's given you a clearer, more informed perspective on the UK's strategic approach to AI regulation.
Thanks for the discussion.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.